Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour. On behalf of the Government of Ontario and in my capacity as President of the Treasury Board, I'm pleased to be here today with the Deputy Premier and Minister of Health, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and Mr. Michael Lindsay. Today, we're here to respond to the Auditor General's 2024 annual report, which was tabled in the Ontario Legislature earlier this morning. As a government, we will review the Auditor General's report. Building on their recommendations, we will further our efforts to ensure that our government delivers the best value for money possible through prudent fiscal management. By doing so, we are not only addressing current needs, but laying a strong fiscal foundation for future generations. Merci. Thank you very much. We will now be happy to take questions.
Why are the people of Ontario on the hook for $2.2 billion to redevelop Ontario Place, Minister, when they were led to believe there wouldn't be much at all taxpayer cost associated?
Thank you for the question. I'll pass it to Mr. Lindsay.
Good afternoon, everybody. First, I'd like to thank the Auditor General and her team for their hard work over the course of the past year with us at Infrastructure Ontario on both of the audits that are at topic today. To your question, in 2019, IO was directed by government to run a process with 4 objectives: finding an international set of bidders who were willing to give us proposals that would align with the government's vision, would represent financial benefits to taxpayers, had viable proposals at their heart, and ultimately with entities that had a track record of performance. We've continued to work with the Ministry of Infrastructure and government over the course of the last couple of years to ensure that each one of those objectives is met. As part of that, we've continued to refine what tenant landlord costs are and shall be for the investment that's going to happen at Ontario Place. And I just want to say that some of these categories of investment have always been the sorts of things that the Government of Ontario would need to invest in order to rehabilitate and bring Ontario Place back to life, regardless of what proposals ultimately prospered through a call for development process, like site servicing, replacing 60-year-old infrastructure down at Ontario Place, shoreline remediation, and more recently, some of the investments that the government is still contemplating making in the 50-acre green park, which is at the heart of this redevelopment of Ontario Place. So I would say, in answer to the question, we've continued to be prudent with the Government of Ontario to think about the investments that we as a landlord have to make in this property in order to bring it back to life and attract millions of visitors a year.
Since it's now been revealed that the Science Centre will cost more to relocate than it would to fix up in its current location, will the government rethink those plans?
I don't agree with that characterization. So what's been reported today by the Auditor General is that we continue to work with the Ministry of Infrastructure on the cost of a new science centre down at Ontario Place. I think it's worth remembering what we're doing by doing that. We're creating a new state-of-the-art, bespoke, built-for-purpose Ontario Science Centre that's going to last for several generations. That's optimized in respect of exhibit space and is going to give incredible experiences to generations of kids. Those costs are not yet finalized. The figures that are in the Auditor General's report are preliminary. We continue to work with both the Science Centre and the Ministry of Infrastructure to figure out what those final costs are going to be. But I would simply stress that, as we said at a press conference almost a year ago, the costs associated with rehabilitating and remediating the existing facility at 770 Don Mills have continued to increase as well, consistent with inflation and the things that we've been discovering about the condition of that facility, most notably its roof.
Mr. Lindsay, why was there so much involvement from Infrastructure Ontario in the call for development process? There was one VP, I'm not sure if that was yourself at the time or somebody else. There was one VP who was having direct conversations with some of the bidders. Why was that taking place when the rules explicitly stated that there was to be no communication with government or government officials?
And I appreciate the question. Look, it was not me. I was not yet in role at Infrastructure Ontario. But I want to say that I would repeat what the Auditor General said earlier today. She has found no evidence that there was any inappropriate contact between IO employees and our bidders. She has given us very good recommendations, which we've accepted, about making sure that in future, interactions between participants and responsible executives at Infrastructure Ontario always go through transaction advisors and others who we ultimately retain to help us with these processes. But what we've learned through this process is those interactions on behalf of IO employees with participants were on matters logistical and procedural and related to the responsibilities of parties. They did not bear in any way upon the evaluation of the proposals that came in, which was done by a core set of non-partisan officials on a consensus scoring basis.
The specifically said, though, that the process was not fair, transparent, or accountable. So how is the public supposed to have confidence in the process?
I'll let the Auditor General characterize it as she sees fit. I will simply tell you that Infrastructure Ontario was directed in 2019 to run a process that, by the AG's own admission earlier today, was not meant to be a structured procurement. It was meant to be a real estate solicitation. We wanted to take in ideas from across the globe and compare them on an apples to oranges basis to see which of these ideas best aligned with the government's vision and would have the best benefits to taxpayers. We did so, creating a process that was competitive, that had nonpartisan evaluation at its core, and that borrowed many of the best practices of what we at Infrastructure Ontario are known for in respect of running these processes. But flexibility was always a part of the process, and I would absolutely stand behind the notion that the recommendations that we made to government after evaluation were on the basis of conversation by nonpartisan evaluators.
Mr. Calandra, the MZO's report, based on the findings, it really seems like before you took over the role, it was this rather haphazard process to determine the issues of these. When you took over, you reviewed quite closely, I think it was roughly half of them. Based on the auditor's findings, are you going to now review more of these from before your tenure?
Yeah, no. When I came to the position, we put a number of them on. We reviewed some. I think I've revoked 3 and have put a number of them on a watch list to ascertain what progress has been made. And as I announced a couple of weeks ago, that was a process that it was an 18-month process, but I'm reducing that process down to a 12-month process. As I've looked at this, and we brought in the new framework, of course, the MZO framework in April of 2024, we want to ensure that the ultimate goal, which is to build more homes, jobs, and economic activity, is met. That's what the framework, the new framework, is really about. That was the goal right from the beginning, frankly. But look, I take what the Auditor General has suggested. I think we moved pretty quickly, even in advance of this report. Frankly, I think a vast majority of the recommendations we've already implemented with the new MZO framework. But as we said a couple of weeks ago, absolutely want to ensure that the ultimate goal is to get a shovel in the ground. Then we are going to ensure that any MZO that we approve has to be followed up by a shovel in the ground. If it's not, then I won't hesitate to revoke it.
One in particular that's highlighted as a case study in the report, it's, what's described about how it came to be is eerily similar to the Greenbelt report from last year, even involving some of the same individuals. I believe that's Ontario Regulation 160/2022. Do you have any desire to look at that specific MZO?
Look, we have reviewed every MZO. The department and myself, in some instances, have called mayors to see where they're at on some of these approved MZOs. But I know the department has gone back to every single one of those MZOs to ask, where are you? Is it something that you still would like to pursue? And how does it fit in with the new framework that we put in place last April? But ultimately, in the end, again, I'll reiterate this, and I can't say this more strongly. If we provide an MZO, it is my expectation that that results in a shovel in the ground. And if it does not result in a shovel in the ground, then I will not hesitate to revoke an MZO that is not being utilized for the purpose that it was given.
Mr. Jones, the auditor calculated about 1,600 opioid overdoses that were reversed at supervised consumption sites. Does that not call into question your claim that no one will die as a result of shuttering those sites?
It's pretty clear that as we see the number of individuals and families impacted by the opioid crisis, that we need to do more. And that is why we made that announcement at the Association of Municipalities of Ontario to say we want to transition into heart hubs. These are facilities that are actually going to provide more than just facilitating drug use. We want to make sure that there is a pathway out of addictions, and with our Heart Hub model, you will see social work, you will see healthcare, you will see pathways for addiction, mental health assistance, and of course supportive housing. And I have to say, since we made that announcement in August, we've seen a great deal of interest from our municipal partners, as well as community agencies that are coming together and making sure that it is not not just about swapping out a dirty needle for a clean needle. It's about to provide that service, that hope that we can get people on the path to treatment.
We do know that that specific part, though, of supervised consumption does save lives. Why didn't the government do an impact assessment and look at how many people might die as a result of this decision?
Well, we did actually study the Riverdale site specifically after that horrific death of a mother. And, when you start to read that report and see how it impacts communities, how parents are literally not taking their children to their local playground because they're concerned about drug paraphernalia that they are finding in those playgrounds, we're acting. We want people to have a pathway out of addictions. And the way to do that is to ensure that we have organizations working together and ensuring that they have all access to service. It might be social services today, it might be supportive housing, and hopefully it is accessing mental health treatment and addictions recovery. Thank you.
A lot about the drug paraphernalia in public being a big reason behind this, but the report says that your ministry is aware that drug paraphernalia and drug use could increase in public if people don't have places to do it in private, like the safe consumption sites. So how do you explain that? It says that it's going to get worse.
Listen, I've spoken to store owners. I've spoken to restaurateurs. I've spoken to mall facilities who are literally finding drug paraphernalia in their washrooms, on their facilities. There is no doubt that we can do better, and we will do better with these 19 heart hubs. We are enabling and investing in a model that I believe will ultimately lead to people getting some hope and getting some pathways to treatment. Our investments in mental health and addictions are unparalleled. When we see the number of new treatment beds that are available, we're almost at 400 new since 2018. When we see youth wellness hubs now opening in the province of Ontario, something that didn't exist prior to 2018 under the leadership of Premier Ford, we want people to have pathways out. And I will say again, swapping a dirty needle for a clean one is not a pathway out and does not give people hope, and that's what we need to provide.
Health experts. The overall themes of this report, which are, Ontario Place, all those decisions were not fair, transparent, or accountable. As we've mentioned, that MZOs are kind of haphazard, and on the safe consumption sites, the move to hard hubs was done without proper planning. These are not flattering things to be said about a government that's seeking re-election. So, opposition parties are saying this is you guys doing whatever the hell you want without listening to better advice or going to get expert advice. So, how do you defend that?
Well, respectfully, we are seeing that there is more opioid use in our communities. When we hear from police, I'm going to speak specifically to the issue that you highlighted. We are acting. We are putting investments. We are opening up applications to say, you want to transition out of that consumption site, we are giving you that opportunity. When the heart hubs are operationalized, it actually will amount to almost 3 times more funding. And that speaks to the fact that we want to make sure that there is a full service model for people, whether it's health, whether it's housing, whether it's social services, and whether it's treatment for mental health and addictions.
I understand that, but my overall question was these themes that the government does whatever it wants with MZOs, with Ontario Place, not listening to advice, not following proper procedures and policy development and whatnot. What do you say to that?
I say it speaks to our interest and our motivation to get things done. We've had governments for decades study issues, and we need a government now, and you are seeing a government now that when emerging issues come forward, we are there to provide options and to act. And I can say, we often talk about the speed of government and the ability to react quickly. What you are seeing with many of the issues, whether it is building and accessing more housing, whether it is a facility that unfortunately was deemed to be unsafe, whether it is a rise in opioid use, that you have a government that is acting and quickly implementing new policies.
Okay to bypass due process just because you want to get things done?
We have not bypassed due process. What we have done is ensured that we have a path forward and we are consulting with our stakeholders. There is no doubt that we have heard very clearly that neighborhoods, that families, that communities see the active drug use and they want a government to act. We have seen where we need more housing in the province of Ontario. You have a government that is reacting. Those are issues that as we respond to the stakeholders, as we respond to the families in Ontario, you have a government that is acting on these issues because we know the people of Ontario need and deserve that.
Minister, it's not a question of action or acting, it's a question of whether or not those actions will have a direct or indirect loss of life because of. Even in the report, it says the ministry has not developed plans to mitigate the risk prior to making this decision, which include the number of impacted individuals, the increased overdoses and risk of death, and the financial and operational burden on emergency departments. Again, the question is not about acting, it's about the ramifications of those actions. Do you not believe still that someone may die because of this decision?
So are you suggesting, as we see rising opioid use in our neighborhoods, in our communities, across Canada, that we should not be acting and responding to that? I vehemently oppose and disagree with you. We are seeing rising rates, and we are doing something that we believe will ultimately make a difference to the people of Ontario. You need to make sure that we have not only the housing, that we have access to addiction treatment, we have the ability to coordinate and connect people to social services, to healthcare. This and that is what the Heart Hubs are all about. Thank you.
Mr. Lindsay, can you tell us today, will the Eglinton Crosstown open at some point in 2025, sir?
Honored to have been asked by the Premier and the Minister of Transportation to go over and provide temporary leadership to Metrolinx. I want to thank Phil and the whole team at Metrolinx. Over the last 5-6 years, IO and Metrolinx have partnered together to progress one of the most ambitious capital programs in the history of Canada, and I will do everything that I can in partnership with government to bring that project online as fast as we can.
You're not planning to leave your post in Infrastructure Ontario? You're going to stick around there after? How long is this appointment going to last?
At this point, I'm doing everything that I can in order to make sure that the Eglinton Crosstown, as well as other important transit projects, stay on track. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lindsay, sorry, just one more question. So what are you going to do differently that Mr. Mercer didn't do to ensure that the Eglinton Crosstown LRT opens? Nothing else has changed except the person at the top. So what are you going to do differently?
Well, I'm going to start talking to partners and government, and I'm going to talk to the staff at Metrolinx. I mean, IO and Metrolinx have obviously been partnered quite closely in respect of major capital procurements and the management of the construction of these LRT projects. So I certainly don't start from zero, but I think this is a moment, intentionally, of trying to think about, with fresh eyes, what could we do in order to hasten the delivery of these projects, and those are the conversations I'm going to be having.
But the Premier did not give you a date in terms of when he would like it to be open?
The Premier told me to try to get the Eglinton Crosstown delivered as fast as we could, and I intend to do just that in partnership with our private sector partners and people within government.
And turning to looking at the Ontario line, you said about looking at lessons that can be learned from those conversations. Anything you think that could be applied there to maybe not have the Ontario line be late?
Look, if you zoom out more broadly, the last 4 to 5 years here in the province of Ontario have been remarkably successful in respect of the number of major capital projects that have been initiated and delivered. 36 alone at Infrastructure Ontario in the last 4 years. So I would say across government, Infrastructure Ontario, Metrolinx, ministries, we have 100% demonstrated an ability to make progress on major capital projects. And every lesson that we can apply to these massive critical transit projects shall be. And I'm looking forward to doing precisely that.
Why are you the one here responding to this and not the minister? She's the elected official.
Yes.
So Kinga is ill, but I know if she was here, she would talk about the need to move forward on these projects. You know, we have Ontario Place, a beautiful gem that has frankly been ignored and underutilized and underused. We have the Ontario Science Centre that was declared a risk. We have thousands of children who want to access the Ontario Science Centre every single year, and we need to make sure that both of those assets, both of those gems, are available to Ontario residents and Ontario families for years to come.
The opposition is calling for her to resign or be fired. Will that happen?
I don't see why. She's actually leading some very important files and has made progress on them. And when we see that all-of-government approach, where we are ensuring that people have the ability to use these assets, use these gems for years to come, now is not the time to be looking at swapping and changing out ministers. She's doing an excellent job.
Minister, what would you say to Ontarians who might be gobsmacked today that $2.2 billion of their taxpayer dollars are going to redevelop Ontario Place and subsidize a cash flow negative European spa company? What would you say to those concerns?
I would say we have seen Ontario Place ignored for far too long. We have now some proposals that are going to build on an already existing 50-acre natural park at this beautiful gem that has been underutilized. We need to make sure that we have an Ontario Place that is available for all, and that includes multiple partners leveraging all of those different assets that we can see in this location.
It costs $2.2 billion to do that.
We are not at the final numbers yet, but what do we have right now? We have an underutilized asset, and we want to make sure that all of the pieces that look at what we can do in this space to bring it back to, frankly, what Bill Davis envisioned 50-plus years ago.
This will be the last question.
Non, écoutez, la vérificatrice générale fait des audits des dépenses de la province et pour les 7 dernières années, nous avons reçu une audit qui est complètement de la plus haute non qualifiée. Les 2 dernières années du gouvernement libéral, c'était des audits qui étaient qualifiés. Alors, nous sommes un gouvernement transparent et nous avons reçu les recommandations de la vérificatrice générale. Nous allons les regarder et puis nous allons procéder avec une grande somme des recommandations. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you.